Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me today, I've got Mac.
Good evening.
Unfortunately, Gio is still recovering from Onana's most recent error, so he won't be joining us today. But we are back covering the action from this week's Champions League games, and we'll also be previewing match week 8 of the Premier League. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @houseof_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Let's start with one of the more interesting matches from this Champions League week, Mac. Real Madrid and Napoli played out a 3-2 game, which Real Madrid went on to win. A lot of goals, a lot of action in this game, but let's hear it from you first, Mac. What were your takes on this game?
I thought this was the best game of any of the fixture lists this weekend going into it and coming out of it. I still have to say the same. These are both high-quality teams. I think that both, one with more reasonable kind of a shot at it, have a great opportunity to be able to go deep into the competition because they have quality defensively, they have quality offensively, they have ability to be able to take control of the midfield. Overall, I thought in this individual fixture, it wasn't even matchups in terms of how the shots played out, possession. It was very even. It was just that little bit more Real Madrid had to be able to get across the finish line, that kind of extra slice of fortune, of course, being the own goal after Valverde strike, which was phenomenal and deserved a goal, but having that little bit of extra kind of luck on your side, a little bit of kind of the star lines in your favor at that moment. I feel like that's what Real Madrid took over the line. And with that being away at Napoli, I think that this result kind of I know it's only 2 games into the overall 6 games for the group stage matchups for the Champions League, but it kind of puts them in a very comfortable position to finish top of the group, and Napoli finishing second and probably the hardest out any other first place team could face. So I think that this sets up a very good tournament that will create interesting matchups for us, as well as still the opportunity for everything to happen in the group stage. So again, tough game to call even out. I think on balance, probably a draw was fair, but like I said, Real Madrid had a little bit extra. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's exactly it, actually. Didn't really feel like any team deserved the win, but of course, if you're going to sort of get that piece of magic from the Valverde goal, that's sometimes what separates just good teams from great teams. I'm not saying that this Real Madrid team is a great team, because of course they are, you could argue, going through a transitional period, even though they've spent over 100 million on a new midfielder. But that's still the case, is they're still not in the final form, and so definitely didn't look, based on the stats I'm looking at, looked like a quite even game. Actually, Napoli looked like they probably edged it on chances overall, but yeah, it looked like a quite even game. Both teams in this group look like they will likely go through, depending on how, obviously, if Union Berlin and the other team that's in this group is Braga, if they are able to sort of upset these two teams. But I feel at this point, still, I would feel confident for Real Madrid and Napoli to go through. That being said, though, tight margins for Real Madrid. Their first game, they did beat Union Berlin, essentially like a last-minute goal. I think that was Bellingham again, one of his many last-minute goals. Very slim margins, and then as well in this one as well, slim margins. And now look, they are 6 points out of 6, 2 wins out of 2, and it feels like in a competition like this, you have to have those moments of luck and sort of things go your way to sort of start your sort of campaign, in which case this sort of looks like it for Madrid, but maybe other teams aren't, I guess, either savvy enough or aren't there in those scenarios as often, and they don't take advantage of that. But Mac, are there any specific players, because when we previewed this, we were looking at specific players that we were going to look at, anyone stand out to you, or anything stand out to you from this game?
Of course. Yeah, let's have our Bellingham corner right now. He pulled out the Superman suit. The Clark Kent Superman went into the phone booth, came out, had 8 minutes really of pure utter magic. Firstly, kind of reading the pass from the Napoli defense, being able to kind of drag the ball forward, tee up finishes for an easy finish. And then himself taking the ball from just inside his opposing team's half, Napoli, driving through, being able to take his man on, to be able to score himself. You just saw every quality you would want from kind of a footballer, where it wasn't even just the ability that he has, it's the mentality, it's the leadership. It's just, he oozes quality, right? Where you just have that air of confidence of like, he could do anything on the ball and anything could really happen. And I think this, so far this season, I think that I don't know how far is too far to take what we can see as his potential. Where is he potentially the best midfielder in the world within a couple of years? Is he that right now? Where does he go down on all-time midfielders considering his age, how much time he has left, injury barring? So I think that in this is kind of a microcosm of how he's been thus far for Real Madrid, and he's kind of taken to La Liga and this Real Madrid team as like a duck to water, where he's extremely comfortable. It's just, again, it's hopefully for, as an England fan myself, hopefully it keeps going. Hopefully he's able to continue to be able to build on this, because I think for just not himself as an individual, but for Real Madrid as a whole, having a player like him, he's a charismatic, good looking, speaks English as well, to be able to bring in that English audience. I think that he has everything you want as a footballer. And in this game, you can kind of just see those qualities that he possesses. So lovely to see. I think that, as you talked about earlier, that separator, I think he is that separator, where if he doesn't play in this game, probably finishes that. Because Napoli did get fortunate with the Ostergaard guard, Kepa kind of, doing a Kepa.
Being Kepa.
Kepa doing a Kepa's, watched too many Onana videos probably, but they did have their fortune as well, where it's just that the magic, the difference between the team was yesterday actually, in terms of time recorded, was Bellingham. So lovely to see. How do you feel about that?
No, of course he can do it all on the pitch. It looks like, and it's going to be interesting to see with Vinny being out and Rodrigo not having sort of the hottest start to the season. It looks like everything is depending on Bellingham, and of course everything is now all about Bellingham's celebration, standing there at the fans, arms out, announcing to everyone he's here. And I think it's even more than that. We can take it into saying he's not just celebrating the goal, he's saying, hey, I'm the man now for this team, and moving forward, this is going to be my team. So yeah, the way he started the season for Real Madrid, I definitely can't complain as a Madrid fan as well. And yeah, he, like you said, I feel like he has everything in the locker. His awareness to be part of that first goal, and then also, of course, his own goal where he dribbles just inside the Napoli half and then just goes through the entire team. It just shows all of his qualities, and I feel like if he's able to stay in this sort of positive role where a lot of the attack goes through him, there is really no ceiling to what he can achieve. So I'm excited to see how that progresses through the season and what happens in the off season. Because if you have a type of player that can give that sort of output, do you really need a big name the likes of Mbappe or Haaland in the coming years? So that'll be interesting to see for me. I guess the only other thing that I wanted to go back to would be Napoli. They did get the win the first game against Braga, but of course taking the loss against Real Madrid. Haven't had apart from, like you said, the first goal Kepa being Kepa, and then the second goal was a penalty kick. I think it might have been a little bit tough to call it, but it was given, and they were able to put that away. I'm just a little bit worried about how they've started this Champions League campaign. I'm not sure, Mac, if I'm reading too much into it, but Napoli, of course, doing so well last season, and now sort of there's been changes to that team. Do you think it's just a blip on the road here? They should still look to top or finish in the top two in their group and proceed forward, or do you think there might be some questions to be asked from that performance that they put out?
I think without a shadow of a doubt, they're going to finish second, right? In all likelihood, in the reverse fixture, playing at the Bernabeu, Real Madrid should comfortably win that. That's just kind of odds-on assumptions here. So Napoli should come in second. I think what will separate them and see if they can make a deep run like they did last year in this competition, because they had that offensively. I think they still have the key players. They still have Osimhen, Kvaratskhelia, Politano. The midfield is still very, very solid. My questions, I understand this individual game was tough in terms of offensive output. In Serie A, they have looked very much offensively very comfortable. So I don't think that'll be too much trouble for them to be able to translate over the success in the Champions League. For me, it comes more defensively because their best defensive player last year now plays for Bayern Munich, Kim. And the player reinforcements that they brought in there are really unproven, in my opinion. And the center half name, he's young, 22. It's difficult to be able to come in and slot in and play against a Real Madrid team, and only a couple of games in Serie A thus far. So I think that they might need reinforcements there or more time for us to be able to see if the proof is in the pudding, if the reinforcements that they got in those positions were good enough to be able to keep them at that level where they were last year, just kind of a one game away potentially from playing in the Champions League final. But I feel like, again, like that, the reason why I prefaced it earlier, I think aside from the group that we're going to talk about shortly, I think that whoever finishes second place here, that's the toughest out in probably any other. That's the best team that could finish second in comparison to any other group. And the comfort for them is they do have two teams that realistically are not going to do much, right? So I think that that's to their benefit. That's to their credit, where they should still be a threat coming into the knockout rounds and could beat any team.
Yeah. Exactly. The great way to put it, for sure. Always tough to be in a group with one of the big boys, but likely two teams that will go quite far in this year's Champions League. But let's go straight into it, Mac. You mentioned it a little bit. Group F, the group of death, as they say. We had a huge matchup this week. Newcastle 4, PSG 1. Man, this was a very entertaining game, and what I mean by that is I honestly did not see such a comfortable Newcastle win coming at all. I think we did preview it a little bit. I'm really shocked at how Luis Enrique decided to line his team up with sort of just Zaire Emery and Ugarte as the two midfielders, and a very offensive three in Kolo Muani, Mbappe, Dembele, and Gonzalo Ramos. It definitely was to their detriment because Newcastle stuck to their plan, were able to pick passes off, especially in that first goal, and really kept them and contained PSG. I feel like they did, PSG, even though they had over 70% possession, didn't really look like they were gonna score a number of goals. What were your takes though for this game?
Yeah, going into it, I think this is. I'll kind of throw egg on my own face here. I said it was an Mbappe show potentially. This was more of an Mbappe no show there. Again, some points of the pitch time during the game, I forgot that he was playing. There wasn't as much impact where he felt across offensively from a lot of their key players. And I think that's not necessarily to the detriment of them. I think that's the credit to Newcastle. Going in terms of the beginning of the season, they started off very, very shaky, in my opinion, and were under fire already. But as soon as the Champions League kind of schedules picked up, seems like the busier the season gets, the better they get, because they're undefeated in the last 6 games going across all competitions. So they've been able to do it. I think that for this game, I think you talked about it, was where their press and their ability to contain PSG's possession into their own half and just deny them to be able to get forward. So even though PSG at times were able to recycle the possession defensively and kind of held the ball for a lot of it, they weren't able to kind of break down that initial line of the Almiron, Isak, as well as Anthony Gordon and whatever midfielder were stepping in, if it be Longstaff, if it be Bruno Guimaraes, if it be Tonali. They did a phenomenal job in containing the space and waiting for those mistakes. And as soon as those mistakes came, they're ready and eager to pounce consistently. So I think that it's a credit to their intensity, their work ethic, and I think in some ways they went all in the first 45 minutes. That they have the energy. They have been out of the Champions League for St. James's Park hasn't seen a Champions League game for almost 20 years. So they had the energy from the fans. They were like, for the first 40 minutes, we want to go all out. We want to press. We're not going to let them take a break. We're going to force them back, and we're going to be able to make sure that we're going to get our opportunities that way. And they were very successful. So in the second half, they didn't have to kind of go all guns a-blazing the entire time. There are certain times where like, okay, yeah, we're going to sit back. We're going to trust our defense, because this is the first time they've conceded in that undefeated run as well. So the defense is really kind of what separated them. So this is their kind of another goal scoring output game, which is phenomenal. But as soon as they have that lead, they're like, yeah, we're very comfortable. They unfortunately did concede one eventually, but they still had enough kind of capabilities. They trust Pope, they trust their defense, where later on, if an opportunity comes up, they'll be okay, but they have enough there. So I think it's full credit to Eddie Howe's understanding of how his team's going to look, how their outline is structured out, and their kind of drive to kill the game in the first half a lot of ways. So it's very surprising to see, but lovely to see. St. James's Park was absolutely bouncing, and watching that game, you wish you were there. I wish I was there holding Alan Shearer with excitement. That's what it was.
he definitely would have been very excited with that. Especially, I'm just gonna read out a couple of the goal scorers. Of course, you got Miguel Almiron, Longstaff, Dan Burn, and of course at the end Fabian Schär. Players who, no disrespect to them, I didn't expect in 2023 to be scoring against PSG in the Champions League. But credit to them, and like you said, the atmosphere, everything leading up to it, was sort of giving Newcastle the best opportunity to do well in this game. Now that being said, it wasn't always going to be easy, but I got to go back to it. Luis Enrique and the way he set up the PSG team, very, very much, I think, underestimated the occasion that it was going to be for Newcastle. Very, very easy for Newcastle to break them down, especially the Sean Longstaff goal, which I think it's fair to say Donnarumma should do a lot better in all other circumstances. But it just shows, you're willing runners, and everyone pulling together, doing their part. If I remember correctly, number of times Sean Longstaff, Aaron Gordon, after they make a tackle, pumping up the crowd. And so that sort of atmosphere, of course, is going to help the team do better. And again, another player that I do want to just quickly mention, Aaron Gordon, he did make that. And I do have to say, I still have a tough spot for him because of what he did to Everton. And I still hope that, when he does go back to Everton as a Newcastle player, they give him the stick. But I got to give it to him. He's performed extremely well since the start of the season. Did not look out of like he didn't belong in this game at all. He actually, in fact, looked like what you expect one of those players on the other team, Dembele, Mbappe, to look like in their sort of in his Champions League home debut. So credit to them. Not a lot of sort of experience in that side either, and they pulled through. And just like I mentioned it, Mac, we were just giving Newcastle all the stick for essentially escaping with a draw out of Milan. Now they got the win against PSG and, of course, top of the group. And it looks like the script has changed. It's going to be tough for other teams, the AC Milan and Dortmund teams, to come to Newcastle and perform well. So does this sort of give Newcastle an advantage now, Mac? Are they sort of the team to beat in this group? What do you think?
So I think having points on the board is the most important thing. And as, of course, they're first place right now with 4 points. PSG with 3, and I think both the other teams with just 2 and 1 points respectively, if I remember correctly. So I think that, of course, they should feel comfortable. They should feel happy that this is where they are. But if you told me the script completely flips for any of these other teams, I wouldn't be surprised. I think all these teams have certain qualities. I think that we won't know really more in terms of who's unlikely going to finish and come out of the group stage, in all likelihood, until the last match week for the group stage. So I think that Newcastle are in the most favorable position, but they still have a lot of work to do, because every team in their group has qualities that can expose them. But they also themselves now have shown they have the qualities can reversely expose that other team. So I think that will be very interesting. I don't think in this reverse fixture, when they're playing at PSG in Paris, that it's going to be the same scoreline. I'd be very surprised if it's that way. So I think that they still have a lot to play for, but they put themselves in a position where if they're smart about the fixtures, if they're smart about their game plans, they can come out of this group and reach knockout round football, which I think is, I think that was their goal. Especially if the group comes out, if we just make it out of the group stage, that's progression. That's something. Even making the Champions League last year was phenomenal. But if they're able to make it out of the knockout stage, and be a dangerous team coming out, I think that's something that they'll be happy with. So definitely good for them. But I think on the other side, though, PSG, they did get hammered in this game. It's just one game, right? It's 1 game out of 6 for this group stage. They're still finishing in second. They still have that home game against Newcastle where they can just completely mollywop them on the reverse side and have the offensive capabilities to do so. So I think that they shouldn't be too concerned themselves. I think everyone in this group still looks with the opportunities like, hey, if a couple more bounces go our way, we could be top of the group. So I think that there's still lots to play for. I'm very excited for how this group shakes out.
Yeah, and so of course, let's just quickly discuss before we take a break the upcoming game for Newcastle in the Premier League. Of course, they will be taking on West Ham. Both teams off the back of 2-0 results in the Premier League last weekend. West Ham will also will be facing will have a game tomorrow, time of recording, in their respective European competitions. So that's going to be another one to watch for them. But yeah, two teams that sort of are hitting form as more and more games come, Mac. And this game is at West Ham, so Newcastle will have to travel to London to face West Ham. What do you expect from this game? Two teams that have been in action midweek. Could there be an upset here, or do you think it would be sort of less action than we've sort of seen already?
I don't mean to kind of throw, I guess, water on the fire of what Newcastle fans might be feeling right now, but I expect a very low-scoring affair in that game, where both teams are just going to try to graft out a result and see if they can kind of just get that 1-0 lead and just sit on it, right? So I think that I wouldn't be surprised if either team wins. Of course, Newcastle do have the advantage where they have that extra day's rest, which I think is absolutely vital, because they, unlike West Ham, in my opinion, have a little bit more quality in their rotation where they could start a couple different players that didn't start in this game, like a Jacob Murphy, like somebody else in midfield, to have Joe Linton be able to come in, whatever it may be. They have a little bit more flexibility, whereas West Ham, they're not as deep. So I think that they should feel a little bit comfortable, but it's always tough when you have either the Wednesday or Thursday, Sunday split, going from Champions or Europa League to Premier League. It's always tough. So I'd be very interested to see how, in tomorrow's game for West Ham, well, very interested to see their lineup, because if they start the regulars, then I think that they're even putting in a deeper position, and more difficult position to face this Newcastle team, which right now, like I said, they're one of the hottest teams. Looks like they can play well defensively, got back to what they were doing last year, and can bang in the goals when needed. So I think that it'll be very dangerous for West Ham not to bring their full force for this Newcastle game.
Yeah, of course. Just checked that they are playing Freiburg, and so they'll be away from home as well. So that's going to be, I expect a lot of rotations. And so for Newcastle, as you said, yeah, don't expect it to be as open as their game against PSG. And for those who are interested in betting, not myself, of course, I would go over for the corners on this one. The teams that are very interested in set pieces, something to watch out for. But let's take a quick break here, Mac, and then we'll be back touching on some more Champions League action, and then we'll preview some APL matches as well. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue our coverage of this week's Champions League matches, but of course now we're going to take a Premier League spin on it. We're going to cover some Premier League teams that were in action. Manchester United up first. Of course, they were hosting Galatasaray. A game, Mac, you and I were thinking, Man U lost Bayern. They should still be comfortable to finish second in that group. They, of course, lost against Galatasaray at home. Let me hear your takes on this game.
I think the title of this section is definitely going to be Prem Teams in Pain, who did not play so well in this most round of fixtures, without a shadow of a doubt. Overall, this game, it's so hard to describe the feelings of it, because as a person who generally enjoys when Manchester United don't do too well, and it's a little bit funny to see their fans waffle around. I generally enjoy that part. Trey, Man United on Twitter, I love you. I won't follow you, but I will look you up after every single time Man U lose, just to see what happened. See what's going on over here. Just take.
So you're looking at his account often these days.
I'm not gonna say it's not my most favorite search if you go into the search engine on my Twitter, but it's definitely up there. Okay. I think overall this game, I want to start with the positives because I want to smooth them aside. It's going to be very, very quick. Højlund looks like the real deal. He looks like he has the drive, the pace, the quality up top. That chip that he's able to pull off later on in the game was phenomenal. His drive for the header for Rashford seems like they're building up a partnership, but it's interesting to see the more and more you see of Højlund, the less and less you see of Rashford, where is it still just going to be a one-man show that we saw last year, but instead of Rashford, it's Højlund. It'll be interesting to see if he can play off successfully a striker, which historically he's never done very well, where he's never been able to been at top form alongside a striker who is. But Højlund himself looks, like I said, the real deal. Has bags of pace, bags of quality, terms of a drive. Seems like there's everything you want as a number 9. Still young, so we'll see if the consistency is there. But a great positive sign and a great signing from Ten Hag. To move to the negatives. Everything else, not so great. You can, and the worst part is, it's not as, in some ways you can look at it as a systemic flaw of how the Ten Hag set out his team and the players that are out there. You can blame injuries, but it's just individual mistakes consistently beat this team up. Is it down to leadership? Is it down to the right players? They've made so many changes. I don't know who to roughly blame, because if you look at kind of even their first goal for Galatasaray from Zaha, like that felt like it was like Joel Embiid being guarded by Isaiah Thomas in the box. It was just it was rough days for him. Zaha bodied him up. And Onana may have even should have got to that one. It looked like he was moving in slow motion off of that kind of shanked finish off of Dallo. Going to then Onana himself giving the ball away to Dries Mertens at the end of the game, which forces Casemiro to get his third red card in a calendar year for Manchester United. The most in history for Man U, which looking back is crazy to think about. You have a player like Cantona or Roy Keane. They didn't get 3 cards in one calendar year, and he did. Does he have like a different ability? But even to, and you want to blame Onana for that, then Galatasaray's third goal of Cardi, if you watching live, I'm like, oh, okay, that was a decent chip. No, that was a horrible chip. Onana just dropped so quick. It looks like he was slipping on ice. It was horrible. So I think that I want to give credit to 1 or 2 players from Man U, but I think the rest of them should be roasted. And I think if Gio wasn't actually sick, he is sick of talking about Man U and their individual flaws that they have, because they're just the same thing over and over again. You change the players, the same issue. I can't tell the difference between Casemiro and Scott McTominay and trying to recover and defend it, because off that second goal for Galatasaray, you see Casemiro checking his shoulder, and the midfielder goes in right ahead of him, and he completely ignores him. Same thing Scott McTominay would have done. There's no difference. What's the difference between Onana and De Gea? One has a different looking beard. They're different beard shapes. This is the only difference. So there's so many problems with Man U. It's laughable. It's hilarious, and great to see. But what are your thoughts? How did you feel about this game? Again, it was Old Trafford too. Come on, man. What are you doing?
Yeah,
like, really?
Yeah. No, that's not great. Not great for sure. I guess just to go back to the positives a little bit. I know that you mentioned Hodgland impressed you. I definitely think both goals that he took were quite impressive. The first one, actually, I think just as good as the second one, because it's so underrated that he is running at full pace. The ball from Rashford is driven at him, and he's able to get good contact to not just, first of all, get there ahead of the defender, but also keeping it on target, because that any sort of power or sort of deflection on that type of cross, it's going to go off target. And so credit to him, and of course his second goal, great job there. Though after that, pretty much it's Rashford and Hodgson or nothing at all. And of course, another player that I highly rate, and Mac, I know you don't rate as highly, is Bruno Fernandes. In a game like this, I would expect him to sort of take more control and be more of a standout player. He looked from what I was able to see quite nowhere to be found, essentially, and similar things could be said about Mason Mount. Not really. I know he had a chance that was blocked sort of from sort of the edge of the box, but apart from that, not much happening. And of course, if you're not really putting things away or you're struggling to, the best thing you can do is keep things tight at the back, and that's of course not what Manchester United did. Dallo, like you said, Zaha should have just finished his celebration by rocking the baby on Dallo, because the way he bodied him.
The too small.
Too small. Yeah, he definitely should have done that, because first of all, you can't let the attacker drag you into your own box and get a shot off. I would, if you didn't get it off the first time, because I know we play amateur football, and we whenever there's a long ball, we sometimes let it bounce. If it does bounce, it's going to cause problems. But at a professional level, you should not be letting that bounce, and that just causes a calamity of errors from there. And then, of course, the Onana mistakes, sort of leading up to the penalty, and then the Amrabat at the third goal, where his clearance is not going far enough, and then, of course, Davinson Sanchez is able to header that ball straight down the middle of the Man U back line, who's essentially out of shape there, and then Icardi just has to run onto it, and even though he did scuff his chance, still was able to beat Onana, which, yeah, a lot of stick is given to Onana at this point in time. I think, I do think it's fair that he should be looked at, but also there is such a big difference, because Inter Milan last year were so solid defensively, where he would have definitely been a lot more protected, and I think less would have been required of him to do in terms of shot stopping. Whereas this year, of course, with all that's happening with Man U, he's facing a lot more shots, and maybe he's just being exposed for his quality as a shot stopper. I think we can all agree he's one of the better goalkeepers with his feet, but you're a goalkeeper at the end of the day, and that's something that is required for you, especially in this day and age with sort of that back line that Man U has. You're going to be called upon a lot more often. But yeah, not impressive at all. And now Casemiro has a red card, so a Champions League campaign that looked like Man U are finally back, and they can potentially look at going further. Definitely not looking that way so far, and of course, we'll definitely have to see what they do in the coming. Firstly, Champions League match that they do have at the end of the of this round here, but even further with further injuries to Lisandro Martinez, and I'm not sure if Amrabat is the first choice at left back when he signed for Man U, but just a whole lot of issues there for Ten Hag and his players. And on that note, I guess to ask you quickly about Ten Hag, Mac, should he be looked at to blame at all in this situation? Is there a possibility that he's no longer going to be with Manchester United, maybe even before the season ends? What are your thoughts on that situation?
In terms of like the overall blame pie, in terms of what his percentage is, I think that he definitely gets a fair chunk of it. I don't think that if you can't fire him right now, you just can't, considering everything that's going on right now internally within the club, some players, their situations. It would look it would look too poor to be able to put him out now. I think that he at least gets until probably closer to the end of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if, let's say, they're in a similar position on the table, knocked out of the Champions League. But even if they are knocked out of the Champions League, if they're in the Europa League competition, what can they do a run there, similar to what they tried to do last year? Maybe get to a final, maybe pick up a trophy in different competition where you do galvanize some support. I think that going into the season, and something that I talked about previously, it would have been better for them to finish in Europa League, where their expectations were lower last year. They didn't finish in the top four. They finished like sixth, but they had more of a semblance of a plan going forward. I think that would have been better long term for Ten Hag's reign at the club. But now, because they've set the standard of we're a Champions League football club under Ten Hag, anything else is a step backwards, and he's going to be looked on negatively. So if they get knocked out of the Champions League early, have the same experience as last year, don't recover and make it into the top four again in the top five now into a Champions League spot in the Premier League, it's going to be a tough look, and he's going to get looked at even more going into this offseason. So the interesting part for me is that even though, again, we just started October, but Man U fans are already counting out the days until January because they need more changes. They need more reinforcements. But what is too much? What are the right areas to start to improve first? I don't know. And it seems clearly to the day as of right now, neither does Man U. So, fun times. I do, it's just a separate side, because I don't rate Bruno as much as you do. I do think that he's a quality player in transition in some moments, and in the right system, he can play very, very well. But I think his mentality as a leader, you have to start to question out, because Manchester United in this game, if you look at it, twice got the lead. Combined the entire game, didn't hold the lead for more than 10 minutes after each goal. Right? One was 4 minutes, one was 6 minutes. I think that you got to look as like, hey, we got a lead. We're at home. Let's just keep the ball in their half. Let's keep a little bit of possession and see if we can kill at least the game and last longer, right? Where we're not conceding golden opportunities right away. So I think that, again, it's tough going from Harry Maguire to Bruno Fernandes, but it maybe was an improvement. I don't know. But I think that, again, overall, as the club as a whole, there's not many bright spots right now. Again, I hope Gio feels better soon.
yeah, definitely hope to have him soon. If not, just to have his opinions on how Manny's doing. But let's move on to another Premier League club that was part of the Champions League action this weekend. That's, of course, Arsenal. They went away to Lens. And we're actually on the end of a defeat here. Just before we quickly dive into the game, Mac, did want to shout out the green away kits from Arsenal. I think those look pretty nice. I do like that kit, but of course, this is not the result that Arsenal would have wanted, and I think I want to hear from you, Mac. Were you sort of disappointed with this performance, or I guess what are your overall takes on this result?
I think It's not a great look. I think that it's not dissimilar in a lot of ways to the Newcastle feeling for Lens, because it's been similar amount of timeline since they've been back in the Champions League, even longer than Arsenal. And it was their first home game where the emotion from the fans was there. It kind of felt like this was a golden opportunity to play a bigger team in Europe and see if they can be able to do something. I think that Lens played very, very well. If you look at their finishes from both goals, absolute quality. Tomlinson, that finish where it was just kind of just touched off to him, and then he's able to half volley with the instep, curling around David Raya, who starts again. I think that that's as good of a finish as you can expect across any player across the world. So I think that they were well deserved for their win. I think that the game overall was a little bit more even. And the moment of the match, in my opinion, was when the game was 1-1 in the 65th minute. From a corner kick, Odegaard drops it in at the 6-yard line. Tomiyasu comes onto it with his left foot and hits it right at the keeper's foot. He directs it right down. Open opportunity. It felt like the seas were parting from there to be able to Arsenal take the lead. He doesn't. A couple minutes later, Lens get their second goal, and we're able to kind of hold up shop there. So I think that's key. I don't think this is too much of a drawback. I'll be honest with you. I think Arsenal still very comfortably right now. I think they're tied for first in the group. I think very comfortably should still finish first in the group. It was an away matchup against a very emotional team, but you started to see a couple key areas where you can expose Arsenal. And the big one for me, and I think Arsenal's biggest Achilles heel defensively, is that Zinchenko spot where you see him consistently on that on the opposing team's right hand side. If he's beat because he's out of position, which is what caused Lens' second goal, with the cross coming in and you're exposing Gabriel potentially, that's a little bit of an area where maybe a team that we're going to be talking about in a couple of minutes can get at them, can do a little bit of damage in that area. So I think that's one thing to be concerned, as well as the Bukayo Saka injury. He had to come off in the 30th minute. He's doubtful from reports are where it seems like everyone just has hands up in the air, be like the shrug emoji, because after the last Premier League game, he wasn't supposed to play in this one from what looks like, and he came on and started. So it'd be very interesting to see if he does or what part he does play going into the Premier League, which I think that Arsenal may have been, in some ways, looking towards that match and maybe moving past this a little bit too much. So, not a great look, but I don't think it's horrendous. But like I said, Lens definitely just earned their victory. I think overall, based off overall chances, should have been a tie, but were well worth their full 3 points.
Yeah, of course, gotta give Lens their credit for their performance against Arsenal. But yeah, just going back to that point about Saka, Mac. Even at the weekend when they faced Bournemouth, I think there were concerns about him potentially not starting in that game, and of course he did, and went on to feature for a period of time in that game as well. So surprised that Saka was picked to start in this game, and unfortunately that he did have to go off injured. Considering the magnitude of the game this weekend, which let's go straight into it. Arsenal are taking on Man City this weekend. Man City did come off of a 3-1 win at RB Leipzig. We were just quickly watching back the goals for Man City. Haaland not performing quite as well, you mentioned, but of course they have Julian Alvarez, which will be interesting, an interesting matchup, but interesting to note as well. Players that will miss the game for Man City are the likes of Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne, which of course both had their parts to do in their matchups against Arsenal last season. This one will definitely be a different one, Mac, where I think Arsenal at home will look to match up with Man City and play them essentially at their own game. I think Arsenal will not shy away from sort of their play style, and we'll be looking at potentially some matchups all over the pitch. I think you mentioned Martinelli should be back from injury here, so that's going to be an interesting matchup with him and Kyle Walker. Havertz is going to be continuing to feature for Arsenal, and that's going to be interesting to see how the defensive and center midfield positions for Man City are able to delegate those players and those responsibilities between Odegaard and Kai Havertz. So what are your takes on this upcoming game, Mac?
I think it's just a very interesting game. I think we're right now, both teams, both Man City and Arsenal, are not playing at kind of peak performance. I think you have to, and I'm going to edge out Arsenal slightly just because at their home, because I think it's fairly even. But I wouldn't be surprised if Haaland, after playing poorly for the last couple of weeks, come in and bags a hat trick. Nothing would shock me with this Man City team in terms of the quality that they have. But I think you can see the difference in the Champions League with Rodri in the lineup versus in their previous matchup in the Premier League without him. He's kind of the straw that stirs the drink, and without him there, I think it's going to be difficult for them to kind of have that metronome like possession. We're able to get up the pitch where they're going to create that abundance of opportunities for their attackers to finally knock a couple in. Whereas Arsenal, I think that they might be in the position where they're actually going to outpossess Man City, and that in some ways may be more comfortable to Holland and conducive to Holland being able to get in behind the Arsenal back line. So I think overall there's interesting matchups across the entire pitch. I'll be very interested to see who does Arsenal start on the wing, because like you said, Martinelli should be back, but does he start coming back from injury? Do they start Trossard on the left hand side? Does Jesus play if Saka's not there? There's a lot more questions for me right now in the Arsenal lineup in the attacking front three versus where, just because of due to injuries, we probably know how Man City are going to line up, right? With certain players coming back and red cards and stuff like that. So I think that, again, this is not the peak matchup right now in the Premier League in terms of, I guess, competitive wise or the best derby. But I think in terms of qualities based off last year, this is the best matchup that we've seen. A team that's knocking on the door right now is Liverpool. So this is something that I think everyone had circled on their calendar, and it's going to be a great litmus test to see where Arsenal is in comparison to this Man City team. Before we move on to something else, I guess, or if you have any thoughts about this game, I do want to have a quick call-out corner right now for Arteta. Because the fact that he started Saka against Lens when there was the doubt seems to now have been, it's not the first time, because the exact same thing happened with Jurgen Timber in the Community Shield, where, I think it was the Community Shield that he got injured, where you could see before the end of halftime, it looked like he picked up a knock, and then he came to the second half, made it worse and had to be subbed off, and now has an Achilles injury, he's out for the whole year. So, I'm fully behind Arteta, but I think the idea being is that if a player's hurt, I think there's certain games or certain opportunities where you don't have to take the risk. It is unnecessary, where you want to protect your player and keep them there and give them the opportunity to rest. Especially a player like Saka, I think he's played in every single Premier League game for Arsenal over the last 2 years or something like that. So I think having the break once in a while would have been nice, especially because supposedly he was limping and in a walking boot after their game against Bournemouth to just turn around and play this midweek game. So a little disappointed, I guess, maybe from him and his management team making a decision to go out there, and it may potentially cost them greatly if Saka's not able to partake in arguably Arsenal's most competitive game, or one of the most important games of the season.
Yeah, that's definitely not a great look. And I know, of course, I know your feelings on Arteta, and we all know the intense manner that he composes himself in, and I think that may have a part to play in sort of encouraging those players who might feel something during the game at halftime, and he's just like an immigrant father. Hey, you're fine. Just continue playing. We need you. He's definitely pulling them over to the side, saying, "I need you. You need to do this for us, for the team." And of course, unfortunately, that those instances definitely can happen with, of course, the loaded schedule that these teams are now find themselves in. But apart from that, I do hope Saka is able to play in this game because, like you said, Mac, it's definitely one of the biggest matchups of the Premier League this season. It definitely doesn't have as much riding on it as it did last season, sort of the reverse fixture that was postponed. But we do expect these two teams to challenge for the title, and so both teams will be looking to get the all 3 points in this game, which really makes it interesting because I think out of all the Premier League teams, these two teams at the moment are the most, how do you say this, Man U like in terms of in the early 2000s when Man U would go down, both always Man U found a way at the end of the game to come back and win it, where Arsenal and Man City, I know Man City just came off of the loss against Wolves this past weekend, but we know their quality and them, even when they find themselves down in games, they're able to have that never die attitude and come back from games. Whereas Arsenal as well, since the start of last season, have that mentality where even if they concede, they're able to come back straight away and respond by getting a goal themselves. So it'll be interesting. I don't think any of these two teams will be counted out, even if they go a goal down early in the game. And so that's what makes it much more interesting in terms of these two teams are so evenly matched. I really can't tell where it's going to go. It might be just honestly a mistake, or someone like we said, like Haaland might be playing out of his body that day and just score a hat trick completely out of form of what's happening. could Julian Alvarez continue to perform well, but also the goals that Man City's conceded against Wolves and RB Leipzig in their most recent games are just willing runners. The likes of Saka, Martinelli can definitely take advantage of that and just go straight at these essentially 3 or 4 center backs that Man City plays now in defense and even in midfield with Akanji featuring in midfield against RB Leipzig. So that'll be interesting for me to watch and something that we'll definitely keep an eye on. But yeah, apart from that, this is all the time we have for today, Mac. So we're going to conclude the podcast here for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Monday when we review the Premier League action from Match Day 8. But until then, Mac, thank you for joining us.
Peace out.
See you guys soon.